Hello and welcome to the CYF course. Today's topic is a vision for singles. We've been speaking a lot about marriage, about families, because this is a place where the young generation is born and raised up, but it doesn't mean that we don't believe in singles, that there is no place for them in the kingdom of God, or that marriage is superior to singleness. Actually, in most of the church history, singleness was considered as superior and more holy. But recent decades have seen a major societal shift towards singleness in the Western nations. This came as a big surprise to experts when they saw the numbers, and it was the lead story in most newspapers. It's part of an international trend. In the US, it's reported that the average person spends more of their adult life single than partnered. And the growth of singleness is a major government policy issue in countries such as Japan and Singapore. We will define single later, but here, single is defined as those who are neither married nor cohabiting. So it's not that people are choosing to cohabit rather than marry. There really are more single people in society than there used to be before. Churches, like those experts, didn't notice the changes happening, so many churches have failed to keep up with the changes in society and changing needs of their congregations. This has led to a drift away from the church by this growing section of the population. This drift appears to start around 25 years of age and is particularly acute in the 25 to 39 age range. In this age group, 13% of married adults in society attend one church or another at least once a month, but only 5% of single people attend church. That means, for example, that if a single person wants to marry someone sharing their Christian faith, they look around and see relatively few others like them. Under 30, people in their teens and 20s tend to consider themselves as not yet partnered rather than single. Nevertheless, they feel it deeply when their peers have boyfriends and girlfriends and they do not. Between 30 and 45 years old, this age group worries more about being single. They say they start to doubt that God has a plan for their lives since the promise of a partner has not been fulfilled. From 46 to 60 years old, single women recognize that they are now unlikely to have a family and they tend to get on with life. Many also say that through their difficulties, they experience deeper faith. However, men do not, possibly still thinking that they might meet a partner and have a family. And over 60s. The over 60s appear to come to terms with their situation, worrying less about the future and being more secure in their faith. However, they feel more strongly that the church is not a good place for single people. Part of the problem for church leaders is that single can mean so many different things, that they may not notice the numbers in their own congregation, nor that some type of singles are drifting away and are no longer around. There are many kinds of singleness. People naturally tend to think in terms of the traditional stage of life, moving from singleness in early adulthood through to marriage, then to children, and finally widowhood later in life. However, whether we like it or not, the shape of families is changing in our societies. Divorce is much more common now than it was a generation or two ago. Many people marry 2 or more times within their lifetime, with children born in these sequential marriages leading to more step families and blended families. Children are also commonly born to cohabiting couples and single parents, and same-sex couples are now recognized both in civil partnership and marriage law. The number of people choosing to live in non-traditional relationships and family structures is increasing. The range of situations in which people find themselves single varies considerably. Those include the following: never married, no children. The number of people who have never married and are not cohabiting is increasing. There are more never married men than women because men appear more likely to marry sequentially, reducing the number of never married women. Single parent, never married. nearly a quarter of families with dependent children are headed by a lone parent, and 86% of them are women. Single parents often face great financial and practical pressure trying to support their children alone. Some may have support from a co-parent, but many do not. Or separated. Although they are a small percentage of the population, separated people are often particularly vulnerable, as they are usually still sorting out their emotions, legal matters and living arrangements. They are legally married, but living as single. Divorced. No children, not remarried. Being divorced without children can make it easier to move on, as people can cut ties with their former spouse more easily and be open to a new relationship. However, divorce can be the end of a dream to have a family, especially for women, so can come with added grief. Single parents and divorce. Being divorced or separated with children is a very different experience to being divorced and childless. There are responsibilities and demands on both former partners, and an ongoing relationship is required for co-parenting the children. Or widowed. Many widowed people do not consider themselves to be single. They say they are married but that their partner has passed on. Living as single in practice. There are some married people who have to live as if they were single. For example, their spouse is away for long periods of time, or their spouse is in long-term care or may no longer recognize them. It is a reason why so many church leaders say they have few singles in their congregation, but when they look hard, they realize they are more than they thought. In fact, 1 in 3 adult churchgoers is single. For every couple, there is a single person, across all denominations and types of church. Well, Jesus himself was single, but notice that he will not stay single for eternity. We are all invited to his wedding, and actually we are all his bride. But because of some of Jesus and Paul's quotations, it became the model for ministry during most of church history. And even now in the Catholic Church, singleness is mandatory to become priest. You know, singleness can be a calling, a gift that is granted by God. I remember a missionary called Edmé Cotier. She was missionary in Angola, and she was captured by the rebellious troops, and she was carried by foot, barefoot actually, and she had to walk for 1,500 kilometers. It was just an incredible story. She wrote a book about that. And I remember she was an old lady, retired, maybe 90 years old. And she was invited to be a speaker in a youth conference. I was there. And she was on stage. And she described how God called her to singlehood. And that was not in her plans, but she said, okay, God, if this is what you want for me, I'm okay with it. But there is one thing I ask you. I don't want to be frustrated. And she was on stage, 90 years old, and she was looking at us and said, challenging us. You know, young people, I can tell you one thing. With Jesus, during all my life, I've never been frustrated. That was beautiful. We need to speak about singleness as a potential gift that can be granted by the Lord. And sometimes it's more a curse, but it can be a blessing depending on the calling that God has put on your life. But most singles, they don't have this gift, and we need to walk alongside them. We often hear church leaders exclaim with frustration that they don't understand why the single people just don't get married. There are many reasons that Christian people find themselves single. Some are of the person's own choosing, and some are cultural, some are due to circumstances. Church teaching also plays a role. Choice. There are Christians who choose to remain single. This might be for personal reasons. Some say they have no physical attraction for others and prefer to be singles. Others love their careers, their independence, and whereas they say they want to meet somebody, might unconsciously prefer their single lives. Others respond to Jesus' word in Matthew 19 about choosing to be single for the sake of the gospel. We hear this particularly from those who have gone out in missionary work. Others are separated but choose to honor their marriage vows and never have another partner. It can be because of the circumstances. The majority of single Christians are single through circumstance. For instance, there are over twice as many educated and professional women in the church as men, meaning there are not enough men to provide husbands for those women, and many choose to remain single rather than marry someone who doesn't share their faith. Other circumstances include widowhood or unwelcome separation or divorce. Church teaching can be a reason. Respondents to surveys report that some church teaching has led to them remaining single when they wanted to marry. They gave 3 areas in which the teaching or lack of it impacted their lives. Some say lack of advice or practical support and even occasional opposition during dating means a relationship may not develop. Others report that a strong prohibition of any physical contact has meant the natural development of a relationship has not been explored to a point where they can make a commitment. Yet others say their church has such a narrow view of children that it drastically reduces the number of potential spouses. Then lack of relationship skills. Within our digital society, there are reports of some relationship skills being lost. In Silicon Valley, people can attend flirting courses, struggling with social skills maybe because of personality, for example, shyness or introversion, or because of family background, or simply because we spend too long in front of electronic devices. We often talk about the need for married people to develop communication skills, but these are needed just as much, perhaps even more, by those seeking a partner. Let me give you 5 easy steps to welcome singles and make them feel part of the community. Because many singles, they resent the church being too much oriented towards families and have difficulties to find their place, especially when we speak about family services and family-friendly things. First, who is single? Who are the single people in your congregations? What age are they? Do they live alone? Are they single parents? Consider all groups and their different needs, never married, widow, divorce, etc. Second, language and messaging. Review the terminology you use on your website and notice board. Consider including a welcome message that specifically mentions single people. If you have a family service, why not change it to all age service? Third, welcome hospitality and outreach. Think about how you welcome single people. Do you notice those arriving alone? Do people go for lunch or drinks after service? Are single people included in dinner invitations as well as couples? Ensure there are social opportunities that welcome people coming on their own. 4. Preaching, spirituality and prayer. Do you have single people preaching? Make sure your sermon, themes, illustrations and prayers are relevant to singles as well as couples and families. And 5. Leadership and positions. Do you have single people in positions of leadership at all levels? From the front of service to small groups, single people feel inspired when they see others like them, particularly leaders who can act as role models. And open families who regularly host or invite singles is to be encouraged in the community. Families, especially families with kids, can minister love, belonging and affirmations for singles. I remember we had a single lady. She was almost part of our families. She was coming to eat several times a week, and single can minister to families. They can help in babysitting, in practical help, but the families can minister to the singles also by loving and having a place to talk and share and receive prayer and support. So developing a spiritual family where singles are welcome, included and affirmed, is mandatory. Jesus' notion of family goes beyond the nuclear family, so let's not use a family talk that excludes some of our most precious members, but reinforce individualisms. even if it is family individualism. So let's now have a few questions that you can share together, and take some time also to pray for the single persons you know around you, so that the Lord can visit them and encourage them in their stage. In the name of Jesus, be blessed and encouraged.